Okay. Hello, everyone, and I'm here with my friend Erica Moore with Five Rings Financial, who also has a sophomore now.
Yeah, that's right.
So, hello, Erica. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm awesome. How about you?
Yep. Go ahead.
I said, how about you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. And so, the one thing I always forget when I'm doing live presentations is how long that timer is. Because a minute feels like
Very long. Feels like forever. I was like, did we have a shorter one? I was thinking that, okay, I wasn't going to say it, but since you did, I was like,
I thought that I've been meaning to change that for so long, and it's only after I put it up that I always start thinking about this. But today we're going to talk a little bit about, first and foremost, we can take questions. You can always put them in the chat, put them in the comments. But today we're just going to talk a little bit about, preparing your kid for the whole admissions process, what's going on, but also why good grades and scholarships are not necessarily enough. And Erica and I talk about this frequently. So, Erica, can you tell me, as a parent, what is your perception, or what before you and I talked, what was your perception of how students got into college and also got money for college?
oh, of course that they would have excellent grades and great SAT, ACT scores. That's the only thing I'd ever been told is make sure she takes a rigorous schedule, great grades,
Mm-hmm.
top of the class kind of thing, and prepare well for those exams.
Right. And
That's
so And so, yeah, I think a lot of parents then end up, I would say, like, I wouldn't just say like really frustrated, but like angry at the end of the admissions process when they're sitting there, they're looking at the bill. And Erica, I know you deal with this a lot in your practice, where parents are looking at their bill and realizing, oh my God.
well, once I scoop them up off the floor and they
Right.
come to, yeah,
And they're realizing we don't have enough money for college, right? And I think
right.
you and I've talked about, like, the most dangerous thing that you can do in that situation is pull from your retirement accounts, start you even just hearing
I'm
it.
starting to break out here when you say that. That's starting to make me itch. I can't.
So pull from your retirement accounts is something that people bring up, or they start, asking their children to essentially like apply for as many scholarships as you can, essentially rectify the situation later. But one of the things that we wanted to talk about tonight is ways that you can essentially not be in that situation and avoid it. And Erica, can actually, you know what? I'm going to ask you a question. Why shouldn't people pull from their retirement accounts? I already
Yeah.
know the answer to this.
Thank you. That is an excellent question. And if anybody's thinking about it, please, please, please listen. Um, and the analogy I love to use is the one we hear on the airlines all the time. When you
Mm-hmm.
get on a plane and the flight attendant gets at the front and they say, put your own mask on before assisting others.
Right.
And the reason they say that is because if you've got, say, an infant child sitting next to you and you put their mask on, but you don't get time to put yours on, you're both going down because that child
Yeah.
cannot help you. It's the same when they're headed to college. If you tap into your long term resources at the age that you probably are when your kids are going to college, you don't have time to make up for that. And here's the thing, that child will probably, when you're in need of those funds back, plus the interest that you lost out on, right? When
Right.
you're in need of them, that child is probably not going to be able to help you. And if they're able, there's no guarantee that they will. And so having your stuff in order is really the best thing that you can do for your child. No parent wants to have their child feel guilty when you can't handle your finances in retirement and feel like they have to pull from their young family to help support you.
Right.
So
Right. Or
best
they
that you
send you
figure it
to
out some other
they
way.
send you to the streets. They feel bad, but they
Or
send you
to
there
the
anyway.
nursing home or wherever it might be.
Right.
But yeah, that it's not a great idea in
Yeah.
pretty much any case.
Yeah. And so for me, I think there's like a lot of, and you know what? I'm actually going to pull this book. So this is one of my favorite books. It's called, you can't even see it.
I cannot.
Yeah, it's called The Price You Pay. The Price. I'm actually referencing another book, and I'm going to pull that one too. Paying the Price by Sarah Goldrick Robb, and it talks about college costs, financial aid, and the betrayal of the American dream. And then there's another book here, and it's called The Price You Pay for College, and it's by Ron Lieber, and it talks about a roadmap to college. And so for me, these are two great books. And I think what's really enlightening about Sarah Goldrick Robb is like a lot of parents get into the situation at the end where they can't afford it, and they're like, "Oh, I'll just go to community college." Like, you guys do 2 years at community college, and then you can leave. The cost of community college is going up, which Dr. Goldrick Robb covers in her book. But then also what you see is that if you do not plan out community college right, you can end up in a 4-year or 6-year or even 8-year situation. And if your student is already having problems living with you at home, they're going to want to move out. Then they're going to take less classes because they get a job. And you could end up in a situation where the student doesn't graduate. So we're lucky to have Northern Virginia Community College in our community. But I always tell people, when you're going to even a great college like Northern Virginia Community College, or even a 4-year college, you have to have a plan. And so for me, when I'm talking to parents, and Erica, you and I have had tons of conversation, the number one thing I try to tell parents is good grades and SAT scores and ACT scores are not enough. And I started to see this, I was working at Colgan and Battlefield and Stonewall, which is now Unity Reed and Patriot. And I started seeing really perfect, near perfect scores coming in with my clients, and lower scores in the classroom, because I always chose to do the lower groups in the classroom. And I started seeing like kids who didn't have great scores getting in and getting scholarships, while kids with really high scores were not getting in, or getting in without scholarships. And it started to reframe how I was thinking about things. And I think it really comes down to, there's a floor and then there's a ceiling when it comes to college admission. Like, the floor is SAT scores and good grades. Like that's going to get you through the door. But the ceiling is, what is your student doing to be, in my mind, like the way that I kind of think about it now is, what is your student doing to stand out? What is your student doing to make a story that the university can essentially sell to get donations? What are they doing to distinguish themselves? And so that's something that you and I have talked about, and ways that you can actually ensure that your student not necessarily does, like, because I think a lot of people are like, okay, so I'll have my student do 100 service hours because that looks great on the college resume. Well, that doesn't really tell me anything about your student. It just tells me what? Like, it tells me essentially nothing about your student when your student is doing 100 hours in a service project that they're not really committed to. And so Erica and I think, oh, you were not frozen for a second, but you were like still for a second. So I thought I had lost you. But yeah. But Eric and I have talked about how you really want to create opportunities that highlight your particular student and what they could be doing and how they could contribute to the college community. And I know your student is in dance, Erica, and we've talked about some opportunities there. But do you feel pressure, like when you're talking to other parents, do you feel the pressure of like, let's do this one activity? Or is that, I don't know what the post-COVID world, do parents even talk to one another anymore?
No, we don't talk to anyone. No, I'm kidding. We do talk. We talk because schools are back in session. And so, we're having activities and, sports and things like that. So yes, we do. Last year we did not, but this year we actually talk.
And does college admissions come up in those conversations, or?
Oh, certainly. With amongst sophomore parents, we're certainly talking about that. The kids are starting to form their ideas about where they want to go. That's another thing we've talked about.
Oh my God. I'm about to go on a rant, but keep going, keep going.
Really, Jen.
Yeah, where they want to go. What else?
They're talking about grades, and I mean the pressure that the kids feel, I think, is really, really severe. I mean, the pressure to make the grade, not even necessarily to learn the material, but the pressure to like put those grades up, and also to be in every activity possible. And I see kids that have like zero time on their schedule, and like you said, not because they're doing something that they're super passionate about, that they would be willing to sacrifice time and sleep and all that for. It's to be busy and to show lots of activities.
Right.
Yeah.
So would it surprise you to know that more than half of the colleges in this country accept more than half of the students in the pool?
That's surprising. Yes. I mean, those statistics are out there, school by school, the percentage that they accept. But it's always interesting to me because while they, they may say, hey, we accept whatever percentage, I just wonder how many of the students that are applying are like outside of their, like below their
Range.
criteria. Right. So are
Right.
you really accepting, I don't know, like what percentage,
What does that
like how
mean?
competitive is it within, the group of students who meet their minimum criteria?
And yet for me, it's a matter of, like I've always told people I don't like admissions games because I feel like everybody ends up doing the same thing. So then you end up applying with virtually the same resume. And so it's hard to distinguish when you could say to your student, okay, what are you actually interested in doing, right? Like what, if dance is your passion, what's one way that you could get back with dance? Or if dance is your passion, what is there a way for you to be a leader in dance? Or if dance is your passion, is there a way for you to make an impact with dance? And as opposed to, throwing you, I had one student that was trying to write a resume about like, I think it was like 100 hours in some service activity. And she was just drawing a blank because she's like, I just didn't care. For 100 hours, I sat there and I didn't care about this activity, but I did it for the sake of admissions. And then the admissions, the school that she got into gave her no money for that. And the parents had thought this is a ticket to get the money. And so for me, it comes down to making sure a student is healthy and happy and doing things that they love so that an admissions officer gets the best sense of who is a student and what type of impact can we anticipate they would make on campus. And that to me is what, I don't think I knew that early in my career when I was doing college admissions work. I thought it was going to come down to numbers and, a lot of fluff activities. But once I started cutting back the fluff and started thinking more in terms of depth than width, then it really improved the outcomes, but also made sure that the students were not in situations where they were 100 hours unhappy. Right. And
A lot of time to be unhappy. Yes.
I'm sorry.
I said that's a lot of time to be unhappy with what you're doing.
And
when
then
you have other choices.
And then you end up in a situation where you're unhappy for 100 hours and you don't even get a financial reward. And so, Erica, I know you and I have talked about the danger of letting your student make a college.
Marry college.
And like, it's funny because you and I kind of work in parallel because at the end of the day, one of the biggest expenses for the American, is it consumer? I guess consumer.
I would say family, really.
Yeah, the American family ends up being college. And I had you on last year talking about how it can become a really emotional decision. Can you explain what you meant by that again? Just like refresh the audience on that.
Yeah, well, we've talked about, the importance of undergraduate and then graduate studies, if a student is going to go on to that, and the importance of keeping the cost of college low. So we talked about parents not dipping into their retirement assets, but also how about students not going into debt that they're going to be repaying for years and years and years. And so, if they will keep an open mind going in, to this whole college application process, and really be looking for the best bargain, the best deal, overall package, not get too hung up on any one school, so that your opportunities are more, that you're more open to opportunities from other
Mm-hmm.
universities that might be giving you a better package. And
Mm-hmm.
so but I'm seeing that happen amongst Skylar's peers right now.
They're already forming lists.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They have a dream school already.
And sometimes it's not the students that have the dream school, it's the parents living vicariously through the students
That's
that have chosen
true.
that student's dream school.
That's true. And
Sometimes
I've always said dream school is the most dangerous concept in admission. So like the number one thing that I try to, and I feel like every year I start thinking maybe we should go earlier. Maybe we should go earlier. But then I'm like, at what point did you start dipping into elementary school?
I was going to say how much earlier. I mean, the process is stressful enough.
Right.
I don't want to stretch this period out any longer.
Right, but
necessary.
But I think even talking about the concept of dream school, like students start forming that really, really early now. And I'm starting to see people coming out of middle school talking about like, if I'm going to get into, XYZ college. And I'm like,
can we get into ninth
your
grade?
Voice hasn't even dropped yet. It's gonna be okay. But I think when you're looking at this, when you start looking at all of the people who could essentially, and I just lost my train of thought, but if you allow a student to pick a dream school, the first question I would have is like, based on what criteria? Like, what is the criteria? And people will say, one of the things that I think is also very dangerous is this concept of you have to go to a place that makes you feel like home. Like it needs to feel like home. And I promise you,
I haven't heard that one.
Like they're like, you're going to get, it's not like they never say home, but it's like, you're going to get there and you're just going to know. You're going to know it's a right place for you. Like everything, like when you land on the right campus, and even when you talk to students, you'll hear them say, I just got on this campus and I just knew it was a right place for me. And, everything just kind of felt right and things like that. And I always tell people that is the easiest way to end up with a lot of debt, because these colleges, some of them are like Disneyland. Like when you get there, I swear to you, they might be pumping a lot of just good air into the campus, because you're going to get there. I always tell people, go visit Virginia Tech in January. That's a great time to figure out if you're really committed to going to Virginia Tech. But like you get there,
it's where the ground never thaws.
Walk across the drill field in January. If you can walk across the drill field in January and still love Virginia Tech, you're supposed to be at Virginia Tech. As a Hokie, I can tell you, walk across the January drill field, and that's when you know the truth about Virginia Tech. There's no more truth than that. But I think what happens is they're going to show you the best dorms. They're going to show you, everybody's going to be happy. It's going to look like an ad for a college, especially on peak tour times. There's not going to be a leaf falling. If a leaf is falling, it's going to be strategic. It's going to be beautiful. So, of course, these really nice $50,000, $60,000 campuses are going to feel great, right? And then kids are picking it. They're looking at the U.S. News and World Report. They don't realize that most of it is just who knows who and who likes whose college, and like that's a huge part of the ranking. And they're like, oh, well, let me look at, I don't know, let me go down the list, pick 24. I look at the college is saying it's great, it's amazing, blah, 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 it's incredible. Every person on the campus is really happy. They go to YouTube, everybody's happy. And then you're stuck with a college that might not necessarily give you a lot of money, because what happens, and this happens very slowly and strategically, over time, the college campuses convince your student that you can't just apply anywhere. You deserve to go to the most competitive school because you're the most competitive student. And then supply and demand, as Erica knows, when you're applying and everybody has a 3.9 and you have a 3.9, and everybody has 100 service hours and you have 100 service hours, and everybody has a 1,500 and you have a 1,500, they're not going to offer you money. And so you have to figure out within that pool how to distinguish yourself, or you need to figure out how much do I value one school over an education that is not going to put me in debt for the rest of my life. Because I promise you, and I always use boba tea because boba tea is so hot right now, that boba tea bar is not going to, you're not going to be like paying off your student loan and think it was worth it because like you don't even write checks anymore. I don't know why I'm pretending.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah. I mean, if there are students watching this, they're like, what is she doing?
But it's like, you're not going to be like typing in your credit card and be like, that boba tea bar, that burrito bar was worth it, right?
Worth that extra $120,000 that I'm now in debt.
Yeah, but you talked about how sometimes the emotional decisions kind of make sense. I know.
I don't think so.
Well, you said that you have to kind of figure out how are you going to make the decision.
Oh, well, yes. And you touched on it. Know what it is that you're looking for. What are the criteria that you're looking for, so that when you're evaluating the schools, that you're comparing them well. Mm-hmm. This kind of a campus, these kinds of classes, this kind of environment, this kind of cost,
Right.
like all of those things. And then when you're evaluating the schools, you're doing that fairly against what it is that you've said you want.
Right.
But also, like you said, it's like, I loved your analogy. It's like Disneyland.
It is, though. Some of these, these places have lazy rivers, right? There are colleges with lazy.
Give me the list of those so I can steer her clear of that. I got my girl in the lazy river instead of the library. So,
but then you also have to look at the most competitive colleges in this country are on what's called 100% Needmet System, where they're saying you're not going to get money for your scholarship. You're not going to get money for your grades, and you're not going to get money for your SAT and ACT. We're going to figure out what your EFC, your expected family contribution on your FAFSA is, and how much the government expects you to contribute is how much we will expect you to contribute. We will pay all costs. And so parents are like, okay, fine, that's fine if you love your expected family contribution. If not, a lot of parents will say, oh, okay, we'll get scholarships. But what they don't realize is, like, let's say, again, the cost is $60,000 and they bring you down to, 20. Let's say your EFC is 20. So they saved you $40,000. For some colleges, until you meet that $40,000 requirement, you're not getting the scholarship. So like, you're essentially paying every scholarship, which disincentivizes people to actually apply for certain scholarships. Yeah. And so, and then on top of that, for some EFC colleges, they always have this internal calculator that you look at it and you say, wait a second, my EFC was $20,000, but the college believes that I could pay $28,000 for some reason. And they talk about, well, we did an internal calculation. We considered this, this, and this, and we believe that you can contribute X, Y, Z. And so you have to know, for me, like, if you have a really low EFC, it makes sense to be applying to really competitive programs. But if you don't, how much do I want to pay for certain types of education? And Erica is my financial planner, just to be clear. And Erica, like, I feel like I'm trying to become like a mini Erica, because now I have them list all of their schools. And then I have the parents sit down with them and say, we're going to pay this much for this college, this much for this college, this much for this college, and this much for this college, and not a penny more. So don't even come back to us if you get into this college.
Don't need this.
We don't need to talk about it, because it's going to be a no for us. And you have to realize that your student's going to get a lot of pressure as they post social media posts, as they start getting reached out to by the college. So you have to establish a very firm boundary, which is, if you're going to go to this college and it's not this cost, you're going to have to find a way to pay for it. This is all we're going to contribute to this. And if you are getting a 3.8, maybe applying to a school whose average is a 3.5 is going to yield you more scholarship opportunities. Maybe applying to publics rather than privates, privates rather than publics, figuring out what other people are paying and evaluating that, and not necessarily believing people when they say, like, don't worry about applying here. Because that always comes up, like, don't worry about applying here. We have tons of scholarships. But have your students sit down and set this price. My friend Tara actually came up with something today. I'm going to read it to you. She says, YT students with non-university scholarships. Most won't even win them when they apply. They often aren't enough to make a dent. We've made college, you're going to like this because you're about to hear a buzzword of yours. We've made college budgeting a game. It's like a ring toss at a carnival. You see that one kid with a giant stuffed teddy bear and believe it's possible. It's not impossible to win local scholarships. We all know students who have done it. So in America, anyone not wealthy enough for college savings is basically hoping for a scratch-off lottery ticket, selling their personal stories to strangers who have money to give.
That makes it sound really appealing.
Right. But wow. I think that, to me, that is a number one thing you have to realize is the goal always has to be get the money from the college, because your student applying with a bunch of other students to get a scholarship and hoping that that works out is unlikely to really reduce a debt. Maybe you're going to get 5,000 here, 1,000 here, 10,000. But the biggest person who can save you, or the biggest institution that can save you money, is a college itself. Right. And so the first thing, and I know we're going to wrap up pretty soon, but the first thing is you cannot, I'm not saying don't let your student have a, Erica, am I saying don't let your student have a voice?
I think you're saying don't let your student have a strong voice. Like you.
Right. How do you manage that though?
Logically. It's hard. It's really hard because they're talking to their peers that have been, sold on a certain school or whatever, and they're hearing that and they're doing their own research. It's very difficult to keep them grounded. And yeah, I would say even for parents who have saved sufficiently for college, like even if you could afford to just, pay for those colleges that are, ridiculously expensive, even if you could, does it make sense to do it if you don't have to? I think it doesn't. I mean, at least for us, the way that we've saved for college, the funds are flexible. And so what I've done is I've said, look, this is money we've set aside for you. And if you don't use it for college, this can be the down payment on your first house. This can be seed money to start your business if that's the direction you want to go.
You said this is my money, right? You're talking to me directly right now, right?
Yeah, I was talking
to
you.
You set aside money for me.
Well, yes, figuratively.
Me.
Okay. I was looking at you as though you were one of my children.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, but you're not. So
seed money for your business.
And I'm real hopeful that they'll get that and they will be good stewards of that money. I mean, the money is in my name, our name right now. Right. So we're being the good stewards of it right now. But the understanding is that they know that that money was saved for them and for their education. And what doesn't need to get used for education can be used for other positive things for them to use, later in life. And so I'm hoping that that is incentive enough that they will be looking at the value of college the same way that my husband and I are in terms of the choices that we will make together that I will have the final say on. Just saying.
Right. I think, but also talking to your students early, because I think a lot of students get resentful, right? Like they get really resentful at the end because they're like, I remember, I'm not going to tell you what year it happened, but I remember this one student had essentially like a tantrum. It was literally stomping their feet. Like, I worked so hard. I worked so hard, and I took all these AP, and I took all of these, and I did all these hours, and I took my SAT, and I got a good SAT score, and then all of this for nothing because I've got no money. And it's like, what I tell students is hard work is the prerequisite, and it sucks, right? Because that's not what you're told. You're told that at one point you're going to be able to exchange your grades and your SAT scores for money. But you also have to look at it realistically. If every person with good grades could, turn it in for money, then you would not see so many people in debt. That's just the reality. And what happens is you're getting good grades, so you believe I'm entitled to a better education because I'm getting these good grades. And so then you apply to a school where good grades are the norm and you don't stand out. And then you reject every college that says, hey, we would love to have you, but they're not as competitive, or they don't give off the same good vibe for decision day or the social media posts. And then you put yourself in a situation, and I'm not saying you do this because the colleges are doing this, but you're playing into their hand when you're doing that. And then they say, oh, just go out, get the local scholarships, instead of you going back to the college and saying, I want to come here. I don't have enough money. You said you were going to give me enough money to come here. Can we appeal this decision? Can we have more money? And how do we do that strategically without sounding entitled, which is ironic because they kind of sucked you in. So I would say focus on the good grades and are the prerequisite. But the other thing I tell parents all the time is a lot of parents, and I don't know if your friend group or people that do this, they pull kids from certain classes that they're going to get bad grades in.
I've seen that.
Yeah. And so for me, I like to see like 1 or 2 bad grades, a student who's willing to stick through, especially like if you're getting a bad grade in, I don't know, like art, like that doesn't really make sense. But if you're getting a bad grade in calculus, and by bad grade, I know in Northern Virginia, this is going to be like a curse word. You're getting a C or a B in calculus, but your student is like staying after school and trying and doing to me, that provides more value because it's a higher rigorous course than going to a lower, less rigorous course. But at the same time, teach your students that good grades and SAT scores are the prerequisite. We're going to focus on service projects that you actually want to do. Because I find that when students are doing service projects they actually want to do, or leadership projects that they actually want to do, they tend to go out of their way to do them well.
Oh, yeah.
And do you find that with your student?
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Things that she has interest in? Absolutely. Like, you don't have to say, get up. You don't have to say,
get dressed.
Remember, we're doing this. Yeah. I mean, the things that she's really interested in, I don't have to push.
Yeah.
So you know what your kid is into and what they're not.
And give them an opportunity to shine in it, right? And then find a college, and this is going to be key, find a college that actually values it instead of being like, oh, I should apply here because it's the most competitive. If that's, to me, start thinking when that school sends me something back and they say your kid can come here, but they have to pay full price, they're saying that they don't value what your student
whatever they're bringing
to the table. And you have to say, I value that education more than they value my student. How is that going to translate? And Erica, because I'm your client, also know that the costs aren't fixed for college. Do you find a lot of parents come back and they're like, oh my God, it just increased by.
Yeah. Well, I believe we're gonna see more of that. You probably know more than I do, but just the cost of everything right now is going up. I took the Money 101 workshop, and I had not really been talking about inflation much. And I I got to take that section and put it back in because inflation has been so low, but it's impacting everything right now. I mean, if you've been to the grocery store, you know that, and it's affecting.
If you've been to Sephora,
there's
those of us suffering at Sephora right now.
Yes,
I'm standing in solidarity with you. But
right. Yes.
To me, it was like the most random thing that made me notice inflation, which was like, the cost of like bottled water increased, or like even the cost of like a fountain drink, because I usually bring my own cup, the cost of the fountain drink had increased. And I was like, wait a second.
Wait, what?
Right. But like,
Yes.
I think a lot of parents, I always say, like, to me, and it's not necessarily a fair buffer and it's usually over generous, but tack on about $10,000 to that price. Would you still feel comfortable?
Mm.
And how much is it going to cost to finish, and make sure that your student is not, losing a year or doing 5-year, 6-year graduation. But I think the number one thing is putting yourself back in the seat where you value your student enough to say, this college doesn't necessarily value my student, and there are colleges in this country that do, because it's not, there is only so many colleges that are hyper competitive. And what happens is at the top, we talk about hyper competitiveness, and then we translate that down to every college, and it's not the case for that college. And even asking college people, hey, how much money, like, how do we get merit aid at this college, is like the number one question I would ask. What are your institutional priorities, and how do we get merit aid? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Okay, well, Erica, thank you for joining us for this really brief chat on, aid. I'm going to put these books in the chat because nobody can actually see them. But Erica, I know you're so excited for your kid to go to college and experience admissions.
Last one, yes, I am excited. I'm not so excited about experiencing the admissions process, but I am excited to, help her move in that direction. Yes.
Oh, I thought you were going to say move out. I was like,
well, that too. I mean, I'll miss her, don't get me wrong, but empty nest, I'm interested in that.
And if you guys have any questions, just leave them down below. Erica, how can people find you?
They can reach out to me on 5ringsnationscapital.com, and there's a place where you can get information and connect with me there. All my contact information is out there. So 5ringsnationscapital.com.
And I think I'm Jenn the Tutor on every social media. Yep, I am on every social media platform, and I'm usually on Twitter. So you can all reach me there, but you can also put it in this chat. All right, Erica, I'm going to turn off the live and say goodbye to you after that. Bye, everyone.